Hello, and welcome to the Long Island Local Podcast, brought to you by Audio Workstations here in Bohemia, New York. Let's jump right into the conversation with a Long Island local business owner. All right. Welcome, everyone, to the Long Island Local Podcast. Today we are here with Vanessa Nicoletta, right? Wine ambassador with Boisset.
That's right.
Wine collection, right? I was hoping I'd pronounce that correctly. Did I give it the proper French flair?
That is perfect.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Are we assuming that this is indeed a French brand of wines?
Yes, we are.
Okay.
Yes.
That's an excellent guess. So tell me a little bit about how you discovered them specifically. Boisset themselves.
Well, honestly, I was with another wine company at the time.
Okay.
And I wasn't really thrilled, but so I went on a search for another company that I could feel really great about. And I just came upon just your, garden variety Google, search. And I just looked over the website. I got an amazing feel for it. It had this really luxury feel to it, and just wines from France, wines from California, and everything that they stand for in terms of sustainability and responsibility, and just these beautiful wines with all this family history backed behind it. And so I wanted to explore them. And so it didn't take me long to just make a decision and go with them.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah. I noticed that there often tends to be like a family, association with wineries, and they tend to be like in specific families for long periods of time, and there comes a lot of history and prestige associated with that, and the continuity of one particular family looking out for the grapes is something that we seem to value, right? Does that add some value to a wine?
And so I was hooked as soon as I just went through it, and I just felt really amazing about it, and the wines were even more amazing when I got them.
All right. Well, let's get to those.
Okay.
All right. So what different types of wines are available?
So there is a collection. It literally is a collection of family-owned wineries that are located in Burgundy, France, and also in Napa and Sonoma, California.
Okay.
So, anywhere from your Pinot Noirs that are amazing, your Chardonnays. There are so many different varieties.
That was a red and then a white, right?
A red and a
All
white.
Right, so hold on. Maybe we should back up for the non-wine educated. So how many official broad categories of wines are there? Is it just red and white, or is there a third category that I'm not thinking of?
Oh, well, there's red, there's white, there's rosé.
What defines a rosé?
So a rosé is when they make the wine, right? And they're in the winery, and they combine the skins with the juice after it's pressed.
Okay.
Right? And so with a white wine, you would press the juice out and then ferment the juice away from the skins.
I see.
With the reds, you would keep them in contact with the skins. And with a rosé, you would have some skin contact. It depends on what the winemaker wants to do. So if you want it to be like a light rosé, light in color, it would be maybe 20 minutes to a half an hour skin contact with the juice, or maybe even like 2 hours.
Okay.
But it's a limited amount of skin contact time.
So it's kind of that in between the red and the white category based on how they're preparing it in terms of the association of the skins in there. It's not nothing,
Skin
it's
contact.
not all, it's about half or some percentage.
Somewhere in between there, yeah.
Okay,
Yep.
So I learned something new already. That's good. I didn't know that. I knew rosés existed, but I didn't really know what made them different, right?
Right. And then we have sparkling wine,
Okay.
like champagne or Prosecco.
And what's the method of carbonating that's everyone's using?
Well, there's a whole thing to making champagne.
Okay.
Right. And then there's Prosecco, which is made in a tank.
Okay.
So there's like these different ways you can do it. And takes some explaining. So how do you want me to?
No, I'm interested because I'm aware of champagne and Prosecco. I vaguely think of them in the same category in my mind. I kind of like think of Prosecco as maybe like an Italian version of champagne. Is that completely incorrect? Feel free to enlighten me.
Well, it's if it can only be called champagne if it's made in Champagne, France.
Right.
Right. So
So,
Yeah.
okay, then everything else is some sparkling white wine that's not champagne.
Technically, yes.
Okay. Okay. All right. And now what's with the tank thing? What's with the tank for
What's
Prosecco?
Oh, well, with Prosecco, they just want to keep it nice and fresh,
Okay.
and it's quicker. It's quicker than you would make a champagne. Champagne is at least, off the top of my head, like 18 months.
Wow.
Whereas, Prosecco is a lot shorter, streamlined
Okay. So
process.
the
And it doesn't
time.
cost as much because of that.
Okay.
you
So the
know.
time of production is a lot quicker with Prosecco,
Yes.
and therefore it's not as expensive. Doesn't take as much to produce.
Correct. And like with champagne, there'll be this initial fermentation where you start with like a basic wine, just a real basic wine, and then you add sugar to it, and then you let it ferment in the bottle.
And
then-
that's where you get the natural carbonation from the
Yes.
bottle fermentation, right? You get bubbles automatically from that process.
Yes.
Yes.
Essentially.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
I have a little bit of a knowledge about the difference in beers between how they're like a carbonating with CO2 versus there's beers that are in a bottle similar to how champagne might be, and you're uncorking it and there's a natural carbonation that's in there that they didn't inject from the fermentation in the beer. So I have a
Okay.
little bit of abstract beer knowledge here that I can relate a little bit. I don't think that it's as nice when you're injecting CO2, let's say, into a beer versus allowing just the natural carbonation to do its thing.
Right.
Yeah, that's
Yes.
like, let's stay away from just shooting up beers with CO2. But that's how they do it, so that by the time it gets to you, if it's shipped across the country,
Okay.
it's like ensuring that it will still be bubbly, when they're just like injecting the cans of beer with extra CO2 for that extra carbonation. But, I think it's just a question of them trying to make sure that it can last extra long and have an extra long shelf life, longer than it would be if it were not handled that way.
Okay.
But I'm imagining that there's none of that in the wine world, and all of our carbonation is like strictly coming from the natural fermentation. Is that the case?
Well, yeah. I mean, when the wine ferments, what's happening is that the yeast is eating the sugar that's in the grape, and it produces alcohol, CO2, which is carbon dioxide, and heat. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a cool process.
Yeah.
And very ancient, right? We've been utilizing the fermentation to create alcohol for thousands of years.
Yes. Thousands.
And wine is pretty old, I think, in terms
Yeah.
of the first human consumption of wine. I don't know the exact date off the top of my head, but we've
Me
been
neither.
drinking it for quite a while.
Yeah, but I think originally it was in Georgia, the country Georgia,
Oh,
where they
wow.
were making wine. Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah.
So when you have a wine that's made in France versus a wine that is coming from California, are there different aspects that you can expect, or is it just more about whether it's a red or a white or a rosé in terms of the flavor notes, or can you sense a California versus a France wine with your nose or with your taste buds?
Well, one of the differences is that one is more like an old world, which is your France, Burgundy, which is historic. I mean, Burgundy is the place to experience, those wines, right? And the New World, which is California. So Burgundy being a cooler climate than California, right? So one is warm, one is cool. So in France, you're not going to get as much of what do I want to say? They're more earthy in France,
Okay.
because in California it's warmer, the sugar is more developed in those grapes. Okay, and because the sugar is more developed, there's going to be more pigmentation in the grape. There's going to be a higher alcohol content because the higher in sugar, as the sugar develops, the higher the alcohol higher alcohol wine you're going to end up with.
Right, we're converting the sugars into alcohol, so we start with more of one and we get more of the other.
Yeah. Whereas in, say, for instance, a Pinot Noir from France is going to be, in terms of texture, a little more leaner, if you will, a little more lighter. because it's cooler there, and so the sugar isn't as developed in those grapes. There's also the soil. The soil is much different. The soil plays a part in what the wine will become.
Sure.
There's cause and effect in it, involved in winemaking. Whereas the Pinot Noir that's made in a warmer climate might be a little more fuller bodied, right? So you may have a lighter one from France, but a kind of a darker one from California. There might be some oak aging involved in California.
And then they putting it in like a barrel of oak. Is that what that means? And
Yes.
storing it there?
Yes, yeah. Which imparts its own flavors.
Sure,
into
yeah.
it. Yeah.
Yeah, different
exactly.
woods will definitely influence flavor and all sorts of culinary experiences.
Yeah, and it's not that that's not done in Burgundy, but I think it's a little more widely used in more of a New World type wine.
Yeah. How long
Yeah.
do they leave it in those oak barrels? Long time. I guess they
Yeah,
will.
I don't-
That's what contributes to different styles and different.
Yeah, it depends on what the
specific.
winemaker is going for, really.
Yeah, that's up to the artistic choice of the winemaker.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've heard that wine making is sort of an art, and there's some science to it, but there's a heavy hand of the creator and the choices that are made by the person who's designing the wine. Is that, you think, the case?
Yeah. Yes, very much so.
Okay, and
Yeah.
that comes down to the family history that we were talking about, of sort of some institutional knowledge of people creating good wines and passing on practices and recipes from within the family.
Yes. Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yes. Yep.
All right. So, what is your favorite?
I knew you were going to ask me.
I
this.
had to.
I knew it. I get this question all the time, and it's so hard for me to answer it because I'm constantly developing my palate.
Okay.
So I'm constantly tasting new things, and it depends on my mood. What I'm eating. Depends
Well,
on
yeah.
that too.
Okay, yeah.
So I guess I love steak. And I love a Cabernet Sauvignon. I love a Napa Valley Cabernet Sauvignon, which just kind of matches that steak perfectly.
Okay.
To me.
Yes,
Yeah.
I'm
With
aware
some-
that the pairing is an essential part of understanding wines and what to do with them. So I guess it makes sense that your answer is going to be dependent on where it's happening, what's going on around the
Right,
wine.
exactly.
All right.
Right.
Now, what if there was no food? If we take food out of it and you're just sort of like standing at some social event and the only thing you can have is a glass, what would you choose in the absence of all food?
Well, I'd probably go with a white wine, and
Okay.
I'd probably go with a Sauvignon Blanc.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yes.
So I think that reveals something about when we take the pairing away.
Take the food away.
Yeah, it reveals something about the one-to-one connection of your palate to that wine without anything else to sort of be another part of the equation. So, okay, I think that reveals something. And if you had to choose between California and France,
You're asking me tough questions.
all right,
That's really hard.
it's like two children that you can't choose between. I accept your answer.
Okay.
One of them would certainly be upset with you afterwards, and we can't have states and countries thinking that we're picking favorites.
It's hard to choose when it's like being in love with two people. I don't
Yeah.
know.
It's a fair answer.
Okay.
All right, we will not make you choose.
Thank you.
Okay, so what is the range of pricing of the Boisset collection? Like, if I wanted to buy one right now, what would be, like the least I could possibly spend in order to enjoy one of these wines, and then maybe the high range?
Okay, well, it's a very wide range. The wine list has about 130 wines off the top of my head.
Wow,
So
okay.
I've seen the least be about $20.
Okay.
And I've seen the most be several $100s.
Okay.
Yeah.
That makes sense to me,
Yeah.
just based on general wide wine ranges. It's nice
Yeah.
that they have basically something for everyone in the marketplace.
Yes. Yes.
So, whether or not I'm an expert with a lot of money or someone who doesn't know anything and only has $20 in my pocket, I can get involved in the Boisset collection and sort of work my way up.
Well, that's why they have me. I help them with that.
Exactly. So you can navigate me towards the area of the collection that fits my needs.
What works for you?
Okay, great.
Yes.
And so, is there any sort of like subscription or thing where someone wants these wines like all the time that they can get them often, or is it everything is an individual purchase?
No, actually, I would encourage people to buy more in not so much bulk, but at least, up to a case of wine.
Okay.
Just because you have to consider shipping,
Right.
which with the economy and fuel costs has gone up recently. So that's what I encourage people to do so they get the most for their money.
Right.
But yeah, so we have an amazing wine club. So that's one option.
Okay,
Where,
yeah.
Yeah, where wine is delivered quarterly.
Okay, so quarterly.
Yep, quarterly bottles of either 3, 6, or 12. They could do all whites, all reds, or a mix. And so there's that option, which also being a member of the club entitles them to 20%, up to like 20% off, depending upon the wine.
Okay, so there's a
And-
discounted pricing for club members as well
Yes.
as the deliveries.
And flat rate, like less shipping, flat rate shipping. And also year-round purchases of paying less. So it's more like a membership.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And you can customize exactly which wines are.
Yes, and so they make suggestions based on the seasonality of it. But if you want to change it and customize it a little, you have option to do that. You can change the wine selections.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's great. So you can personalize it a little bit.
Yep.
Yeah, that's cool because if you really do get into these wines and you like them, it's nice to have a vehicle to save a little bit of money and make sure that they'll be there. You don't have to think about it. If you can design your subscription or your membership and join the club, that's a nice option if someone really becomes a fan of the brand.
Yes.
It's nice that you can offer them that as an ambassador.
Yes.
That's one of the good tidings that you bring is membership possibilities for the wine fans. Okay, so when we're looking at some of that high end wine stuff, is it the French wines that are the most expensive, or there are also California wines that get that expensive?
Also the California wines.
Okay.
Yes, because we have some of our flagship wineries are very well known, like Raymond Vineyards, Buena Vista, which is one of the first wineries,
Okay.
in California. And Deloche, which is also another well-known. You could find some of these wines in restaurants and also in some stores.
Okay.
Yeah, and then a lot of them are offered through our ambassadors. Yeah.
And is it? I know that wines that are of a certain vintage will it'll affect their value. Is there all different years that are available, and is it like if something was a really good year and then there's less supply of it, is that also playing into how much these things might cost on the higher end of?
Possibly, yeah. I mean, we have. I'm not sure how far back in vintage we have. I've seen some 2018s of recently. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. I had an experience a number of years ago with just a particular brand of wine that my father had bought, and it was really excellent this one year. And then, like a couple years later, I bought it again, and it was different. It just didn't seem the same, and it's like, okay, this grapes from a different year. This is how it goes.
It varies from vintage to vintage.
It rained less or more that
Yes.
year, and you don't really know.
Depends.
Yeah, so sometimes
Yeah.
you get lucky, and I guess sometimes a particular year will get a reputation as being excellent, and that'll like drive the value of that year over another.
Yes.
But that's all, I guess, based on just people talking, right?
Yes.
And how much people enjoy it.
That's very true.
Yeah, that's amazing. The variety, and even if you do everything the same as a winemaker, it's an organic thing coming from the ground.
Yeah, I mean, climate is like what you would expect it to be, but weather is actually what you get.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Climate is a nice average description of
Exactly.
things over long term, and weather is my shoes are wet.
Exactly.
Okay. So I think I understand a bit more about what's going on in the wine world. Does the sparkling wine world, does that really, is it like fly fishing and regular fishing? Is it like only certain people really enjoy the bubbles and certain people are in camp no bubbles?
Oh, well, I guess that depends on personal preferences. It
Yeah.
comes down to personal preferences.
Mm-hmm.
But I find that when I do tastings, people love bubbly.
And do they say it seems like it's a strong association with celebration, the bubbly wines.
Yes.
So do you find that people drink it less often because they're saving it for those special occasions, or do people enjoy the bubbly wines as often as they do the regular whites and reds?
I think people do tend to save it for special occasions.
Yeah.
But you don't have to.
You don't have to. Yeah.
I don't have to. And in when I do tastings, I like to start with
Yeah.
a sparkler.
Well, you're celebrating the tasting, the fact that the tasting is taking
And it's
place.
also cleansing the palate.
Yeah.
It's
Okay.
getting it ready. It's really
The bubbles play a part in the
Yes.
palate cleansing. That
Yes.
makes sense.
Yes.
Okay. So it's got a functional role.
Yeah,
It
well.
allows you to taste other wines. It's the wine that lets you taste other wines better.
Well, I don't know that I would go from if I'm doing a flight
Uh-huh.
and I start with a sparkling wine, then I go to a white, have them have the sparkler be the palate cleanser.
No,
in
it doesn't
between,
work that
and
way.
then you work up to the reds and the palate cleanser in between the reds. I
No.
just figured just use water.
Okay. Fair enough. I got a little carried away. A little carried away.
I like how you think, though.
Selling more Prosecco. Okay, so yeah, tell me more about the tasting. So, how many different wines can you really kind of present in a tasting before it becomes too many for people to understand what they're tasting?
So I like to cap it at like 6.
Okay.
No more than 7 for me, because after a while, it's like when you're looking for a house, say, and you go out with a realtor and you
Yeah.
go to see like 5, 6 houses, after a while, you're like, I don't remember what
Yeah.
I remember what I saw.
You get fatigue, yeah.
Exactly. And then you kind of get a little tipsy.
Yeah.
And then, remember,
Yes.
I think I liked that one. I
Right.
think, I think I remember liking that one,
Right.
so that kind of thing. But I think that 6 is good, just for, like in terms of tasting, which is different than drinking, right? But
Are
then
you supposed to not swallow it when you're tasting? Is that the etiquette?
you could have this little spit
Right.
thing and spit it out, but most people don't.
Yes.
They're having fun.
Yeah, because that's no fun. Yeah, to
Exactly.
get rid of it.
Exactly.
Okay, now is it all? Do people have to just remember which is their favorite, or are we like writing down as we're sipping notes so that we don't forget when we're too tipsy later? Should we make a little rubric, a little wine rubric, and hand it out at your tastings?
You could do that.
Yeah.
You could do that. Most people tend to take a picture of the label.
Okay.
Yep. And I keep mental notes. I make notes of what people like in case they want to purchase it and have it delivered. Yeah.
If you're rating a wine in your head, do you use like a 1 out of 10 system, or do you use like a 5-star system? How do you like to think of it?
Myself?
Yeah, just if you're prioritizing wines and you thought of your favorite as like the top of some sort of measurement scale, what's your favorite scale to use?
I don't use a scale.
No?
I
Like,
know it's
okay.
either I like it or it's either I love it
Okay.
or I like it.
All right, so we've got a
Yeah.
descriptive scale of
Yeah.
don't really like it a little bit,
Like
it.
would I order this again or not?
Okay.
Yeah.
That's the ultimate test.
That's how I
Yeah,
think about it.
and that's a fair test for a marketplace of anything. Would I actually get this again?
And sometimes if I don't love it, I still might get it again because I want to just give it another chance.
Maybe a different pairing or
Maybe.
different day
Yeah.
comes across a little different. That's fair.
Yeah.
Okay. So when people are utilizing you as a wine ambassador, do you typically present a tasting, or are we just having a conversation about, initial conversation about what type of wines that I might like?
Well, usually I get asked about how the tastings work.
Okay.
Yeah. And so then I explain, we have on our website a menu of different tasting experiences is what they're called, and anywhere between like 3 bottles in a flight up to 6 or 7 in a flight.
Okay.
And it kind of each builds, and how how many bottles, what the price is. It depends on what what they want. To how many people is it going to be?
And where are they taking place typically?
They're in people's homes and
Okay.
places of business too for corporate events.
Okay, so we
Like-
can have a corporate event, or we can have like a house tasting that you can
Yes.
present at. That's cool.
Yeah. So, yeah, it depends on how many people. It depends on how many wines you want to taste. That kind of thing. So we have a whole menu to choose from.
So you can kind of
Yeah.
pre-select. So you can be basically contacted, and we can talk about what wines we want to do in the tasting, and then we can set up a tasting at a home or at a business, and then from there people basically figure out what wines they like and what wines they might want to order.
Yes, or if they would be interested in the wine club.
Yeah, or the club. Yeah.
Yep. And we've got actually we have a certain portfolio of wines set aside for customized labels for businesses.
Okay, so that you can have
Yeah.
their own brand of wine.
Yeah. So say for instance, realtors give closing gifts.
Right.
They can have their logo. There's a whole portfolio set
Yeah.
aside just for that. And
That's
so-
cool. That whole corporate side of things, like having a brand, a label that is like your business's wine, so to speak, so they can do the private labeling.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. So for a corporate tasting,
Yeah.
I can have those wines and maybe do an open house for realtors, an open house for them, right? And they can just kind of sample some of the wines that are offered in that portfolio.
Okay,
to
so
customized wines.
the wines that are available for private labeling are sort of a subset of the larger list of
Yes.
wines. So you have the overall 130 something wines, like you
Yes.
mentioned, and then what percentage of those are available for private labeling, approximately?
7 to 8.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's it's around a little under 10% of the overall available selection will be available to put your own business label on and present as your own as a company.
Correct.
So that's nice. That makes
Yeah.
sense. It can't be everything,
Yeah.
but it's nice that it's something, right? And
Yeah.
it's cool to have your own wine, and you don't have to grow the grapes.
No, you don't.
Yeah, I'm not growing grapes, but I'd like to have my own wine.
That's cool.
That sounds good to me. Sounds like all of the benefit and none of the work.
There you go.
Yeah.
There you go.
All right. Well, on that note, ladies and gentlemen, we will wrap up, and we encourage you to consider your own private label wines, wine clubs, and your favorite wines by contacting Vanessa, and we'll have her information at the end here. And thank you for listening. Thank you for being here, Vanessa, and teaching me what a rosé is, among other things.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for having me.
It's no problem.
This was a lot of fun.
I'm glad you had fun, and we didn't have any wine during the podcast, but we're not making any promises
Not
about
this time.
afterwards.
Okay.
Thanks everyone for listening, and we will see you next time. We'll wave bye.
I am Vanessa Nicoletta, wine ambassador with the Boisset collection of wineries. Boisset is a family-owned collection of over 25 wineries that are located in France and in California. I specialize in corporate wine tastings, gifting, custom labeling, and the wine club. We have something for every new homeowner. For more information or to get a tasting booked, contact me at luxurywine.vanessa@gmail.com.